that's where all this awakening around the man box, this awakening of what society's painted a lot of young men into, and we got to get them out of it in order for them to make better decisions. And so those are probably the two biggest things. The numbers can move people later. Like they can be the bow, the tie the ribbon on the bow. They can be the frosting on the cake, but the meat of everything has got to be, what are you performing to? Who are you trying to be as a man? What do you think that means? Just finish that statement. And a lot of times young men will let you in because they don't know how to finish that sentence.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to Something for Everybody. My name is Aaron Machbitz. Kip, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Aaron. I'm glad to meet you virtually, in person, and super excited for you to share your platform with me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, dude, fired up for this conversation and just everything that you're about. But before we super dive into all of that, most important question is, Kip, how are you doing? Like, actually, for real, how are you doing?
Man, I don't think I'm always invigorated by the Olympics, which is crazy, right? I mean, I don't crazy. I've always, ever since I was a little kid, not the Winter Olympics so much because I don't understand any of it, but the Summer Olympics, I get really patriotic, especially for Team USA basketball and for the men and the women in the 3v3. And I just discovered today, my daughter actually showed me Gold Zone, and we're a red zone house for NFL season. So I found Gold Zone, which is the Olympics equivalent of all this stuff. Man, I'm in a high that you can just get to all the things. I'm not taped delayed on Gold Zone. I get to see it all. So that also allows me to get back to scrolling X and Instagram without getting spoilers. So I'm in a great space, man. I'm ready.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm just like blown away by LeBron James in his 40s,
Yes.
like still just like getting after it. But
yes,
I'm sure we can have like a 3-hour conversation about
you got
all
the biggest
things
LeBron
that he does.
stand in the world here today. So I'm with you. If you want to go down that path, I am with you. I'm a card carrying member of the King James fan club.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. But when did you fall in love with basketball?
Ooh, that's awesome. There's a picture of me. My dad was a coach, right? So my dad was he played college basketball in Billings, Montana, somehow an American, Samoan, Polynesian, raised his sons with my mom was a barrel racing national champion in the snow, which is a whole nother podcast, right? But my dad was a high school and college basketball coach. So my brother and I were always around the game. But I probably got to give a lot of the credit to the Showtime Lakers because that's like when I was old enough to remember like wanting to be in front of the TV when Magic and the Lakers were playing the Celtics, and old enough to remember being like invested in that outcome. So that was probably the beginning of it. And then just my dad's teams, like, my dad's teams were family. They were extensions. They were heroes of ours, even though they were 16, 17-year-old high school kids. They were like icons of ours. They were big brothers of ours because my dad brought them home for a lot of team dinners and time with our house. So Skyview Falcons basketball for both my brother Kane and I both was probably, I'm going to be really good at this because I want to be really good when Skyview plays Billings Senior or Billings West, which is just a random rivalry that nobody knows outside of the 406 zip code. But I wanted to be good for those moments. So that's probably where it started.
Yeah, amazing. I have the baseball basically was my sport that I fell in love with, along with professional wrestling. Those are like my two loves, and I experienced both of those dreams pretty good, and they both changed my life. But the question I think I want to ask you is like, why do you think sports are such a great vehicle to teach life lessons?
Thank you. It's such a unique formula in time, and I probably would have, if you would ask me this when I was like in my 20s, even having been a college athlete and then been a college basketball assistant, I would have told you that the sport itself is full of moments to learn and grow. And now at the 45-year-old, having coached at college for 20 plus years and now coaching high school and doing what I do with teams of men, I think the sport is still neutral. I think at best sports are neutral. The sport itself, baseball, basketball, football. Like if I blew out my knee, my mom would be sad. And the coach and the trainer will help me off, but the game's going to keep going. Like the scoreboard's going to keep rolling. I do think that human beings you experience it with, whatever your sport is, are where you get the framing, the contextualizing, and that emotional connection that we all associate with the sport teaching us lessons. So it's not necessarily, I don't disagree with it, but I think it's because of the humanity and the connections that you have from the game, from actually, because sports are like this last best place where failure is inevitable. and you can't really run from it. It's just a part of what's going to happen. And you're with people when you fail. In a lot of other spaces, you can either hide from failure or you do it solo. In sports, a lot of the time, you're side by side with people you hopefully respect, ultimately, hopefully love, and you're doing that really vulnerable thing together. So I think that's probably part of the great potential that we both see and agree that it has. And then I think it's also a space where I'm going to basketball practice, baseball practice, football practice, soccer practice, expecting to be challenged. Like I probably associate that with the physical nature of the day. But I'm already in a mind space where I want to grow. Like I think today is going to push me somewhere. And I think so often we limit that pushing towards better in the athlete, in the athleticism or the skill set, which is we need to do that. But I think we're in a mind space to grow as a human too. And I think that's probably why some of its power and potential takes place, is because I don't show up everywhere else with that mindset. Even when I go see my best friends now, like I'm going to complain about the Cowboys, but I'm probably not in a space to be challenged with my fatherhood skills or my relationship with my wife. That's probably not part of the equation. But I think in sports, it's already built in with that formula.
Yeah. I think most people don't associate the word you use there, vulnerability, with sports very often, unless you're actually in the arena. Because very little do people associate like truly going for something is very vulnerable, man. Because if I fall flat on my face, I'm fucking naked in the middle of the floor. That's vulnerable. That's vulnerability. It's the same if me and you are going to create a great friendship, I got to be vulnerable with you. And I don't know how you're going to perceive that. And it's the same way, like truly going for something in life. And I love that word is being used more in a sports context, so that young men, which is obviously what we're going to get into, can see that that's not a thing that we have to be afraid of, but we can develop the courage and the honesty to say, okay, if I can go for it here with my teammates in a sports context, why can't I think about that in relationship to my emotional health, or how I want to be a brother, or how I want to be a friend, or how I want to eventually be a husband, or whatever the case may be. And so I think when I now that I think about it much more deeper than I did when I was playing, especially having a lot of these conversations with people like yourself, I now try to associate those types of lessons more than, whatever it might be other than that. Of course, you want to get the best out of your athlete. That's why they're there. But there's so many other things that can be blossomed through that, which is obviously why, you started Teams of Men and the work that you're doing. But I just wanted to, throw that out there.
No, I think, we got a mantra shirt because you're speaking gospel, man, because vulnerability is connection. Because so often as young men and male athletes, we don't want to admit that we care. But the fact that we're in this sport, the fact that hopefully we're chasing team success, we have a drive to achieve ourselves, that's admitting that you give a damn. Right? That's admitting that, this matters to me. Like this can drive me emotionally from 1 to 100 in a second because I really do feel it. And I'm glad that you're platforming it, because I do think vulnerability is a way for teams to come together and find success. I think it gets framed as a weakness and it's a strength. And I think that the sooner we can admit, like whether it was in your baseball time or the teams you've been around, like I'm in a slump. I may not have the answer. I can't just grit my teeth to a double next at bat. Like I've got to go through some processing and I can't just grit my teeth and make 5 threes in a row. There's things I have to do. And what if I'm going through the same thing? Now we have that connection point to work on it together, to marshal forces together, rather than falling in the tropes of, as a man, I've got to chase this solo. Horseshit.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of that, I guess, it'd be important to sort of explain maybe the origin story of Teams of Men and how that started. And then we'll get into what's happening now. And I got a bunch of other questions, but maybe we'll start there.
No, thank you, sir. And it's really a culmination of a series of events, but a lifetime of role models and belief systems, like evolving into one and coalescing into like an aha moment. Like it sounds cliche. And it's not like the skies parted for me in a particular day in 2013, but I was 3 or 4 years into being a head coach at the NCAA Division III level, right? And I got the job when I was 29 years old. So, I thought I was 3 to 4 years away from being the Ducks head coach. And then I win a couple Pac-12 titles and I'll be the Lakers head coach. Like boom, 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 this thing's set up. And then shit wasn't working like that, right? I was served a lot of humble pie, and I was losing on the scoreboard, and I didn't recognize it. I was also losing a little bit on myself, being so scoreboard curriculum driven. Because like I mentioned, I was raised by my dad who was a lifelong educator. And I say educator also as a coach, but like a power of connection and role modeling and leadership in the community. Plus, my mom was a 35-year Montessori school principal. So my brother and I, my brother's a defensive coordinator at Nevada now. So we're both in the family business, so to speak. But we've been raised that sports are supposed to be transformational. That if somebody's lucky enough to earn teammate next to you, then they're basically family. And what you do with that has less to do with championships and more to do with lifelong connections, just like we talked about earlier. But I knew that I'd been caught up and my nights were exceptionally stressed and no sleeping because of scoreboards. And then this rash of gender violence incidents happened in the off season on my campus where I was the head basketball coach. And I'd been there at that point for damn near 15 years as a player and assistant and then as a young head coach. So the alumni base, certain powers on campus, parents of current players, parents of recruits were asking me, like, Kip, what is going on? These things are happening. Sexual assault on campus by male athletes, a situation happening with domestic violence. It was high profile in Salem. All these things are happening. What the hell's going on? And it was really hard for me to sleep at night, man, because I couldn't say anything to them other than, well, it's not my guys. My guys didn't do it, which was factually accurate. Yes, my guys hadn't done it. But I knew, and I respected the coaches whose players had made horrible, harmful decisions. I knew they were coaching to the same level I was. They were doing the same things. So how could I say that I was doing anything different to prevent these harms when I wasn't? I was like, hey, if we win, let's stay humble. And then I'll see you practice weights, film, game. If we lose, let's stay resilient. I'll see you practice weights, film, game. Just rinse and repeat and let me dive into ball screen defense because that's easier and more comfortable for me to try to solve. And I finally just got to a point I couldn't do it anymore. Like I could not be that person. I couldn't look in the mirror. I had a hard time being like, you're who you're supposed to be, you're who you're raised to be, you're who you want to be. Because I had like probably 8 states on the roster at that time. And I had been in all these homes in front of all these parents saying, hey, send me Terrell and I'll give you back a great man. Send me Taylor and I'll give you back a great man. I wasn't doing that. I was giving them maybe a better defender, maybe a better one-on-one player. Like that was horse shit. So I walked across campus and I went to the Gender Resources and Advocacy Center and I talked to the director, Carly Roner, who to this day is a friend of mine. And I said, Carly, I don't want my guys doing this. I don't want them to be in the next wave of headlines. I don't want them committing these harms. What do I do? And she started the process of what became in our program over a decade's worth of work, a 4-year character development, master's degree in reimagining manhood to prevent gender violence and doing it through the scope of your team. Like this is what our freshmen are going to do as freshmen collegiate basketball players. Here is your curriculum and the plan. Sophomores, this is what you have. Juniors, this is what you have. Seniors, this is what you have. With the idea being, if we do this, at least as a staff, as a campus, as a department, we can say we tried. Because we know nothing is 100% preventative. Nothing is guaranteed to reframe and reshape young men's belief systems and ultimately their choices. But hopefully we're doing some version of let me expose you to truth, let me expose you to better and different and reshape your decision-making paradigm. And I told moms and dads later on as we had this established, this is for when he's 23 in a bachelor party in Vegas. Because I'm not going to be there and neither are you. And we hope he has a damn good time. And we also hope he goes to bed and nobody's harmed, nobody's hurt, and there's no repercussions from that damn good time. He's going to have to make these choices on his own. And so that was the goal. And as it evolved and grew, it became this whole other thing besides just my programs, teams of men. It became what I could do across the country in helping coaches, athletic departments, players try to do the same work and really be mindful of, hey, we have this platform as athletes. You're going to walk up on a platform at some point, and whether or not you're LeBron James or whether or not you're the local high school shortstop star, a little kid's going to listen to you. He's going to be influenced by what you say, what you do, how you act. And I can either send you up there naked, unprepared, and whatever happens, happens, or we can send you up there with a toolkit and a blueprint to spread positivity and change in a good way. And that's what we've tried to do.
Yeah, that's amazing because one of the absolute most sinister and evil parts of especially college male athletics is the things that athletes get away with simply because they play the fucking sport and they throw the fucking ball down the field or they hit the ball far.
Right.
Like you got to be fucking kidding me. And then everyone on the team sees that. And then it bleeds out into all these other places. Of course, you see it in professional athletics. Like some people get in trouble. Some people are let back in the league. Like okay,
Yes.
especially in baseball, the minor leaguers always get caught with steroids because like, who cares about that guy? But the one, you get my point, obviously. And so,
yes.
They're like, because the coaches, like obviously, the coaches aren't doing anything to talk about these very touchy-feely subjects they feel are touchy-feely, but are extremely important, like consent and gender-based violence and some of these things. So what have you found when you're going through this as some of the ineffective policies that were there, and how have you tried to change that a little bit?
And I did it myself. So I don't want anyone listening to think like this Kip guy's up here preaching like he's the perfect model. Like if my wife thought I was spreading Kip's version of masculinity when I was 30 years old to the rest of the world, she'd laugh hysterically and pull the plug. Right. But to your first point, before I dive in, like so often in sports, accountability is seen as a hall pass for morality. I mean, achievement is seen as a hall pass for morality. Or if I hit a home run or I have a certain points per game, my ultimate vision, and we do this with a lot of teams, like, hey, what do you see when you win the title? What do you see when you're All-American? What do you see when you're first team All-Conference? Well, I see a party, or I see escape from morality, escape from beliefs, and I see a woman owing me something. Right. And so, I mean, that's like we're in it. Our culture, our sports vibe and our culture is one of perpetration and escape from that. So I thank you for naming that, because I had to come to that realization too. In terms of errors, I effed this up the first year, completely shit the bed the first year because I moved by stats. I'm an analytics basketball guy. I love numbers. I love points per possession. I love all these things. I just rolled out stats. I rolled out scary stats to my players, and I put them up on screens in the middle of meetings, or I text them, or I send them an article which is all scary facts. And the facts were true. The violence that the women, LGBTQ minorities, younger men on teams, the violence they face, right? All these facts were true, but they didn't move people anywhere. And the reason being, I had to learn this from Carly and other professionals that I've encountered throughout growing in my own ability to do this work, is it's very easy as a young man to disassociate from that. Like, coach, I see that. I might even believe you, coach, that rape happens on campus. I might even believe you, coach, that hazing and child abuse happens in the world. I'm never going to do that shit. It's really easy to move myself off the number if I don't see any version of me getting there. What I had to learn was, number one, the pyramid of violence, that you could be the rape culture pyramid, violence in general. There's always a foundation of this violence. And that violence is all the things we know exist in tea rooms we've both been a part of. Locker room banter, jokes, ribbing, oh, I'm just joking, all this bullshit, and all these words that we let be the norm are core. At the very least, they're numbing you to that, and you're less likely to say something to someone else, and you're less likely to look internally if you're numb to that kind of thought process or language, right? Number two, as I went through this, and I should have known this as a coach, because, I never once stopped. We're going to play a pressing team from California. Well, guys, you know what I did? I said, don't turn it over. I'll see you at the game, right? I never did that shit, right? Nobody ever told a baseball player, hey, don't strike out. Cool. No at-bats in BP. I'll see you at the game, right? We would never settle for that as coaches, right? We do all this prep. But we do that with gender violence prevention, with what we're telling young men. Oh, I told him. I said, don't. Hey, we even have a sign. It says respect. We would never stop at that as coaches for onboarding new skill sets, but we do in the work. And I had to learn and recognize that even if I had good policy, it didn't matter if I wasn't diving into the root causes of these choices. And that's where all this awakening around the man box, this awakening of what society's painted a lot of young men into, and we got to get them out of it in order for them to make better decisions. And so those are probably the two biggest things. The numbers can move people later. Like, they can be the bow, tie the ribbon on the bow. They can be the frosting on the cake, but the meat of everything has got to be, what are you performing to? Who are you trying to be as a man? What do you think that means? Just finish that statement. And a lot of times young men will let you in because they don't know how to finish that sentence. And that's like oh gosh, we're connected now. Now we can do this work.
Yeah, the only reason I can name that sort of behavior is because I participated in it. I felt, especially in college, that I was entitled to the women that came to my house to party. I felt like it was okay for me to haze the younger freshmen on the team because it happened to me. Like, the only reason I can name it is, again, because I was in it, doing it, feeling the same way. And no one talked to me about it. Like, obviously, my mom and my dad smoked me about consent and how to treat women, like, before I got to university. But like, the vibe is different when you get around your teammates and people think you're cool because you're winning games. And like, I went to a small Division I, so like everybody knew everybody, especially athletes. And like, so like people knew what was happening, and the same people came to the party and all this sorts of stuff. And so I can see why and athletes get trapped in that, because again, I did it. And so I understand, but if there's no concrete conversation about it, then nothing is ever going to change. I'm not sure if you know who Dr. Michael Gervais is, but I study his work a lot. The name
sounds familiar, but I'm going to go look him up now after we're done.
Yeah, he's a sports psychologist, great podcast, but he talks about how culture is not putting signs up on the wall. Signs up on the wall may help, but you have to actually be about it for the signs to actually matter. Now, if no one knows what those signs mean, like I can be like, hey, trust the process. And my players are like, okay.
Right.
Like you never talked about it, coach, but you got a cool fucking sign. That's nice, man. And so that's really what you're talking about, is like, we got to get our players to be about it. And then once we're about it, then cool. The signs and the texts and the messaging can all work in conjunction with already like moving in that be about it action sort of phase.
Yes. And isn't that like the athletic model anyway? Like, think of all the coaches you've had and us as coaches now. We preach reps. We preach time. We preach you got to put the work in, but then we settle for what we would lose our minds on players about. If a kid came to you and said, Coach, I should probably hit cleanup. And you'd be like, why? Well, I kind of want to. And, I saw the sign, right? Like if somebody was like, Coach, I should start. And I said, why? Well, I want to. That's not how the game works. And that's not how this stuff works either. And so part of it really is getting coaches to recognize they already have these toolkits. They already have this. I think coaches are masterminds at sequencing information rollout. Like whether it's for me and we're going to put in a press, a football team putting in their third down package, offense or defense. Think of like coaches know right now what they're going to do on November 14th. They know what's going to happen. They know the 7-minute segment, the 12 minutes. They already have that. I'm telling them that in being in this other world and learning from professionals, oftentimes in this other world, the prevention experts are women who have worked in anonymity and underfunded and undervalued forever. What I've learned, like, hey, we need 5 doses to start. We need 5 doses, 5 exposures to new before we'll even start considering in our minds change. So, coach, give me 5 doses. Give me 5 segments in your season where you care about this stuff. You could even start with respect. Like, give me what the hell that actually means, right? Because I could say I respect somebody enough to call them up to better, but what if I just say, motherfucker, be better? Is that really respect? I don't know. We haven't talked about it. We haven't read it. So I think there's a learned helplessness sometimes from coaches to onboard this, which I'm trying to overcome and meet them where they're at without just shaking the tree like, you got to be kidding me. Because they do have these skill sets and they're in such a perfect position in young men's lives. Like Coach, Aaron, you probably think of something right now that a coach told you that's still in your brain. My coach, Ron Lebsock from high school football, said it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. I don't even know what that shit means. And I still I can say it verbatim, right? And he instilled that in me. And I'm not saying that's bad, but what if there was something else on top of that? Right? What if there's something on consent? What if there's something on the true measure of a man is the people he loves, right? Like, who knows? So that's what the goal and the vision is, coaches rooted in this, versed in this, and still kicking ass. You can still win this way. And I think oftentimes, unfortunately, just because I didn't at the college level, people associate the failure with, well, you spent too much time with teams of men. No, I kept my job. I kept my job for damn near 15 years in an industry that averages 3.2 without a championship on the wall because we did this stuff. We provided value. I mean, I survived it, honestly. Like, it's like I'm running around like, it was really fun when we finished Butt Naked last in 2012. That was cool. And we didn't like that, but we were versed and had the tools to navigate it together to show up stronger at the other side.
Yeah. Kip, you want to know the story that stands out to me the most about one of my coaches from college? Okay. So I went to South Dakota State to play baseball, and obviously closer to season, like as the weather, like in fall, like around October, the weather starts to get pretty bad. Right. And when we try to practice before season starts, it's really bad. And so we're trying to get on the field, and we're going to tough it out. We're going to get on the field because we got a game soon, and we haven't been on a baseball field in like 6 months, but we got to do it. And everyone is out there except for the head coach of the baseball team is in the press box telling us what to do through the speaker. And in that moment, I told my team, because I was either my junior or senior year, I was one of the guys on the team. I said, we're not going to have a bad season, but this guy doesn't really care about us. We're going to play for each other, and we're going to move in that direction. Yeah. And that was one of the most important lessons I learned. Like, he was not in the trenches with us. He was in the warm press box telling us what to do from above, like he was God. And I'm like, unbelievable. I'm a 19-year-old guy. I don't know much about much, but I know that shit doesn't fly, and you're not going to get the best out of any of your people. That stands out the most to me as something I absolutely do not ever want to do as a coach or a father or a friend or anyone. And so, I figured I'd share that with you.
I appreciate you sharing, because that's modeling, right? And so much of this work is exactly what you said. Because I tell people all the time, listen, coach, I would love to come speak to your team. That's awesome. You can tell from me, I don't mind hearing myself talk. But the power of this is going to be absolutely cut in half, destroyed if you walk out of the room the second I start talking. If I'm giving a presentation on consent skills, if I'm giving a presentation on the intentional team room, and you and your staff lead your young men, whether it's middle school kids through Oregon State men's basketball, right? They will sniff out inauthenticity. They will sniff out phony. They will sniff out fake. And I'm not saying they'll say that about me. They'll know you don't give a shit. So they might remember me for half a day because that Simone guy said funny stuff. But if you don't stay in there and learn and onboard and take it further because they trust you, actually, they know you, then it won't mean nothing. Then you're checking the box, right? Yep. So no, thank you for sharing that, because it is so. Coaches, I think we put a lot of stock sometimes in our tactical acumen, in our preparation, but sometimes it's the smallest details of how we act that actually matter.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned that pretty easily from coaching 9-year-olds.
Yes. Right.
And I think,
and you've seen, like, we hear so much about culture, right? With coaches, like, oh, our culture. And even if the culture, like you said, even if the culture is one of hard work, right? And we go all out all the time. And I got all these guys all out all the time. If the climate is one of silence, is one of degradation, is one of invisibility, no matter how much I want to, I'm not fully giving me to the culture because I feel invisible, because I feel unseen, I feel unvalued. And that's not saying that every coach owes every kid every at bat. No, hell no. You got to earn your opportunities. But being the I see you moments, I think every coach owes every kid that every day. Like, I see you. Nice haircut, man. Oh, hey, you changed your shoes. Hey, like, what is it that I have as a connection as a human being that I can show I see you as a human? You got to go earn as an athlete, but I see you, man. You're here every day. And that in and of itself is helping in the teams of men world, because so many men, the studies show, feel invisible. So many men feel unseen by anyone in their orbit. And that's when you got trouble, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's when the really dangerous stuff to others and to oneself also is important to note start to happen. So then how are we going to try and redefine masculinity, at least in your view? What does that look like?
I think we got to start by increasing the ability of men to see, diagnose, and blow up the man box, and then be able to take it wherever they want to go. When I say man box, I'm taking from Tony Porter from A Call to Men, who coined the term. And it really defines the invisible walls we put around men, put around ourselves as we're learning it through society, that in order to be a man, right, I've got to exist solo, that, the alpha male fallacy, where I've got to do everything solo without connection, without true emotional attachment to anything. I got to go do. I've got to go achieve and dominate everyone in my orbit, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's in my salary, whether that's in the bedroom. I've got to go conquest. I have to do all this as a static robot, and I have to. The worst part of this is the version of, because it adds up on itself in that, hey, yesterday I proved to you that I am a man. Today I've got to go a step further. Like, remember yesterday I told you I took her out on a date and we kissed? Well, the next time I go on a date, I got to come tell you that we did something more. And it doesn't even matter if I'm actually ready for that, if she's ready for that, if we talk about it. I got to go back and tell the boys. And just like you said, Aaron, I know this is real because I lived it and did it to people. Like, I did this version of, you know what? I know damn well about me, all these failings and these nerves I have as an 18-year-old, as a 22-year-old. But in this team, I have a voice. I'm a leader. I'm the best player. So in the back of the bus, in the back of the airplane, in the hotel, I'm going to call out all your failings according to the man box so nobody gets to me about it. And I'm going to be the funny guy. Oh, Kip's so funny. Kip tells the best stories. And it all was rooted in other people's hurt because I didn't want that gaze to come back at me. And that's the precarious nature of this man box. So the sooner we can get young men to see it and recognize these false messages of who they should be, then we free them up to go find who they want to be. And I don't ever want to put out a bulleted list of what Kip thinks it is, because I want young men to go find it themselves, right? Because my version might be curiosity plus unlearning plus reflection. Other men might find it in giving of themselves, in time, and in community. I don't know. But I don't want any of us to exist in this man box anymore. And I think the man box itself has creeped into the lexicon of sport, of how we define an athlete's success or a team's success. You can see some of these through lines of the bullshit the man box presents.
Yeah. Why is curiosity and unlearning, why are those important to you?
Because I think that's a great question. I think curiosity has allowed me to continue to grow, has allowed me to never stay stagnant in either myself, my knowledge, or who I am. I think there's versions of yourself. I think if you root yourself in, I want to stay curious, humble, and growing, then you don't have to stay rooted to ideas or beliefs or actions that don't serve you anymore. Because I think we get caught up in, well, I want to be authentic, so I can't flip-flop. Well, flip-flop is rooted in, I'm going to grab onto one thing that's static. I think life is evolving, right? So if my core being is staying curious, staying humble, dropping things that don't serve me, onboarding new things, and being willing to do it all over again, I can stay pretty true to that. Right. So I think that's probably, and honestly, this is rooted in, thank God. And this, people ask me all the time, if you could go back, would you change your record in college basketball coaching? And of course I would, for my players, for my assistant coaches that bled and sacrificed and gave me their soul and had to look up at that damn scoreboard so often and feel deflated. If I could go back and change that for them, but I get to keep the lessons of the ass whippings that I learned, I'd do it tomorrow. But if you're telling me we're going to go back and win and I'm going to stay the cocky, arrogant, static guy that I was at 29, I don't think I want to, man. I really don't. Like, I think losing taught me a new version. And it doesn't mean I think I can keep doing this and find wins and find competitive greatness. Absolutely. But I don't want to go back to being that guy that was single-mindedly like, whatever the end of that thing is the value. And I don't want to be that person.
Yeah. I resonate with the value of curiosity a lot. I mean, it's one of the big reasons why I do this podcast. This episode will be episode 291, Kip.
Wow, and congrats. That's amazing.
Thank you. And probably maybe the first 170, my mom was the only listener. And so what do I do it for? Because I'm curious. And I learned this thing from Dr. Jordan Peterson a long time ago in one of his books where he said, everyone can teach you something. Everyone knows something that you don't know. And I think that's great because that's absolutely true. Like I know a little bit about like a couple things. I'm pretty good at like a couple things. But like there's so many things I don't. So why not stay curious? And that, I can still be judgmental. Of course I can be. That's just part of human nature. But if I try and lead with my curiosity, then it just puts me in a better spot, at a better perspective, especially with how divisive, today's world is with our political climate. It's out of fucking control. So if I can do that and not get, trapped in some of those hard, bad conversations, then, I feel like I'm at least in a better space with more peace and tranquility in my life. And so that's always helpful for me, but I love that that's a value for you as well.
Well, thank you for saying about the peace and tranquility, because I feel I get to that flow state where time flies because I'm engaged more often when I'm learning, even when I'm teaching, like, I practice. And as much as I enjoy practice, I really do. But some of it comes back from reflection and learning from the guys, right? I know for me, for whether it's not just reading and Kip reads 500 books. No, that's not it. Podcast, diving in, reading certain things. And where does that take me on an exploration? Like, even if it's the right answer sometimes sometimes that stop point, the end of the journey, is disappointing to me, right? Because there's not more to go find out. I recognize there's definitely times we need to stand in what we know and use and stand in our power. But I am much more likely to be in a good mood and in that flow state of just being when I'm searching something.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the other thing you said was basically about, sort of being hyper focused on the results. And I related a lot to, because I'm in the mental performance, sort of mental health space. Okay. And for a really long time, right? As you know, in sports, it was always like grind, got to work harder, got to work harder. And that was like the only antidote to anything you were trying to do. Now people talk about, well, what about your psychological skills? What about how you're sleeping? What about recovery? What about your relationships? Right. Your relationships deeply impact how well you're going to play on the court or the field. And so I think now that is like sports are always like a little bit ahead of culture, I think is cool. And like that's being integrated now into other places. So I think the same thing can happen with masculinity and how we redefine that. But I think what now it's coming is like the results idea. Like if I'm always focused on outcome, I'm not even paying attention to all this amazing stuff that's happening here, like how much better I've gotten, the improvements I've made, the relationships I've had. And so, yes, of course, everything in life is results driven. Like it is. Like if you don't get the job done, you don't have a job anymore. I understand that, of course. Right. But if that's my only focus, then I'm not really unlocking my potential. I'm playing tight because I'm not actually trusting my abilities. And so I think that's really cool, just in regards to helping men see that as well. Because then not everything in life has to be a competition. It can just be, I'm doing the thing, man, because I love doing the thing. And that's cool.
Yes. I think there's two things struck me when you were speaking to that. One is the belief that, and I know I had this, and I think my wife gave me the book probably after my 5th year, maybe. It's The Happiness Advantage, where they argue, the book argues that happy doesn't come after you succeed when you're happy. So like flipping that mindset, like, well, you know how many times coaches, and I did this, hey, leave all your shit at the door, not figuratively and literally, like all your angst, all your stress, all your worry, leave it there, because they do know that we perform better in that freedom of mind. Let's grant that. If I'm free of all that, I will play better. But you haven't given me any toolkits or any ways to leave it there. And you, coach, you damn sure don't leave your shit at the door. You bleed out on us all practice. Right. So both when you were talking, it made me think I do think we have to help our athletes find that competitive piece to be great, but that requires the work and the skill sets and the fluency of everything you just named that we didn't pay attention to maybe when we were players. I think people ask me all the time, Kip, you've been coaching 25, 26 years. Are kids different? I said, yeah, because they're more aware of what they deserve. I didn't know that I deserved this stuff. Right. And as much as like, I think we sometimes, and I know I did this and friends of mine and colleagues of mine have talked about, well, Kip, my coach from 1989, my coach from 2001, he was an asshole. He was hard. And look at me. I'm happy with my life. I'm happy with my career. Hey, that's awesome. But I think you're giving that guy too much credit. I think you should give yourself some credit for being resilient and surviving. Like you mentioned, like we survived an asshole to put us in the snow and he stayed in the box. I survived that. I'm not where I am because he did that. I'm here despite him. So imagine what we could do as coaches, more fluent in the stuff you just mentioned, more give a shit about rest, more give a shit about and admitting the realities of mental health and need for breaks and need for restoration. What if we onboarded all this other stuff with that? Oh my God, what could we be? So I think that's I co-sign what you're saying 100%. There's a new reality and a new potential and new inputs shouldn't be seen as worse. Right? They're different. It's not worse.
They're different. Yeah. But they're proactive. And I think if you can frame it in that way to an athlete, like, then it's great. I've been saying that we need to make mental health sexier. It needs to be a sexier rebrand.
Yes. 100%.
But I mean, that's the whole thing. Like if you can get someone to buy into the fact that this is going to make them better, and I frame it in a context for their performance, they're not going to just ignore all the breathing techniques and the visualization that out in their, when they go do their school presentation, they're like, oh, I was nervous in my game the other day. I used these couple breathing techniques. I got myself centered. Okay. Why not do it in this thing? Even though I don't care about it as much, I still have to do it. And so there's always going to be those through lines, but it's important, and being proactive about it is super important. So especially we can stop some of these things that are happening, maybe the violence or whatever the case may be, not stop it all. That's impossible, but at least get up front about it at least.
Right. And you had a great point earlier about how some of this build up and you end up hurting yourself. And we do a session with a lot of kids, and depending on the age groups, we might use a glass of water, we might use a backpack. But you think about all the things that goes into our emotional backpacks we carry as men every day, and all the hats that we all wear, right? Our players are the same. And eventually that damn thing gets too heavy. We don't notice it, right? We don't notice that, hey, this kid practiced really well. He's going through a lot of stuff. God, he's a soldier. He's a dog. Eventually it's going to get too heavy. He's going to either spill it out or he's going to drop it and swing it to the ground. And the people in his orbit, the ones he loves the most, are the ones he's going to spill out on. And that's when we have those moments as coaches where we're like, oh my God, I can't believe John did that. That's not him. I can't believe Kip did that. Yeah, no shit, because we didn't give him the toolkits to unpack it in safe spaces, in courageous spaces. He had to just throw it to the ground, and he's usually surrounded by people that love him when that happens, and that's when we get to those violent moments. So I think, just like you said, there's so much carryover to investing in, just like you made me think of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding activity, right? I mean, I was coaching a club team this summer, and one of our posts, man, he's great, but he does get to the boiling over moments. We tried to give him the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 you can touch, 4 you can hear, 3 you can see, 2 you can taste, 1 you can feel. Try it. If that one sucks, we'll go to the next one, right? But something, because he's going to get to that point. I know I was at that point when my wife was at a conference and all 3 of the babies were here and 2 of them were still in diapers. I needed some grounding, right? I needed that real life stress. It wasn't just a free throw. But I needed reps in that type of stuff. So I think there are so many through lines to why investing in the work it will help you win. Like it will help you win in so many ways, even past the rivalry game.
Yeah. And then you wrote a book called Mirror Training. I don't want you to give too much away, obviously, because we want people to go get the book. But what are some of the core philosophies that you think most important from that book?
I think that the reason the book could be an activation point for anyone that picks it up, whether you're a coach, an athletic director, a player, a parent of a player, is because we really try to buy into, and I really believe this. I think I don't think self-reflection is enough. I think it's important. Accurately remembering and being truthful with yourself about what you did today, what you said, who you affected, but also some self-interrogation's got to be built into that to get to real self-awareness. And I think what the book does, it's a short book on purpose. I know for me, when I read books, even if I love them, by about page 150, I'm ready to go activate. I'm ready to go do. I'm ready to go try. So it's only like 130 pages. But at the end of each chapter is an activity a coach can do, a player can do, a staff can do to do some self-interrogation, some introspection on we did all this work on our end of season analytics for basketball. To say, hey, what was our points per game given up? What did we get out of press break? All these numbers we do. That's the culture. Well, how many games did we miss? How many games not played by players because of behaviors did we have? How many practices missed or lost minutes to time because of behaviors in the hallways or on campus? Did we do that evaluation? That's at the end of one of the chapters. Like really getting to, you can activate this thing. You should not go to chapter 4 without finishing the mirror training activity at the end of chapter 3. And it should, by the end, if you build it up, you should have a plan for year 1. That as much as I'd love you to call me to join our membership group or have me speak, you could just have the book and have year 1 ready for your team. And it's probably more effective because it's in your words and what you're comfortable with. And that's how I tried to structure the book.
That's a really important insight about the self-reflection piece, because reflection's not enough. People talk about that all the time. Right. But as you're saying, there's one step that needs to go further. Okay, you've reflected on these things, but what are actually the key points that I need to be honest with myself? It reminds me of this 3-step approach that I use, which is called awareness, acceptance, and action. Basically the same thing. Yeah. Love it. But you gotta, if I did some really bad stuff this year as a coach, I didn't line up my words and actions. I wasn't on all this stuff. I got to accept that. I can't so that's the interrogation piece of I got to look at myself in the mirror training, quote unquote.
Yes.
And say, this is it. And then then you have the awareness that you need. And then obviously, as you're stating with all these action tips, you got to do the work, which is the only way to get it done. So I think that's a really important insight for people
once
that they can
think
use.
About your career, all the things you've gone through, right? And all the things like there's a truism, and I want to credit a called him in for this too, from Lee. I wish I knew Lena's last name because she did the training on Zoom and I should have paid attention. But she said, once you know, you can never go back to living as if you don't know. Right. And that's universal true everywhere, whether it's sport, whether it's your career, whether it's your partnerships. Once you know, you can't pretend to me, your teammates, or yourself that you didn't know. And that's part of what I think is so powerful. It speaks exactly to your awareness part. Once I know and I'm aware of this, now I can do something. Right. Until I admit it to myself and accept that, like you mentioned, I can stay stationary. I can feign ignorance. But part of what I'm trying to do is get coaches to that. I know I can be part of the solution. I know my guys can be part of the solution. And I think what I've been so excited to see is so many young men do want to be part of the solution. So many young men, either that I interact with. I think last year I spoke to almost 1,000 male athletes across the country. All the studies, some by Equimundo, some by It's On Us, these worldwide global studies, men are starving for ways to be better. Hey, I do want to improve. I want to make the experience of being around me, of being around my group of friends. I want to make it healthy. I want to make it courageous. I want to make it fruitful. I don't know. Right. And I think that's where once coaches accept it, your guys will love this. They're not going to judge you for these conversations. They're not going to be mad at you for having these spaces that you create for them to come talk with each other and you about. They want it. And I think that's been activating for me to be able to serve in that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. They want it. They want the responsibility to try and become the best version of themselves so they can do the same, so they can be that mentor or role model that they're seeing the person in front of them be, or that they wish they had, or that they saw the opposite role model of, whatever the case may be. That's such an important part for a young man's life. It's encouraging him to take on responsibility. I mean, that's where adventure lies. Like, in the most responsibility I can take, that's the adventure. They're looking for that. They want something to belong to, and why not belong to something that's going to make them better, make them more healthy, make them more integrated, as Dr. Robert Glover would talk about.
Yes.
And so that's important because, like, as we know, go ahead. No, you got it.
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say,
the gift of giving them the potential, you can be even more than you are now. I'm not meeting. I hope to, like, this is what I've tried to be better at. I don't want to walk into spaces and give this like you, and this derogatory, accusatory. I want to welcome people into, you know how much potential is in this room for awesomeness in all facets. And I recognize the realities of the world. And, like, I know 9 out of 10 men will not commit these horrible harms that I'm trying to prevent. But of the harms that are committed, 9 out of 10 of them are done by us. So we got to stand in our power that we can fix it. That's awesome. Imagine that. Like, sometimes I know in sports we feel helpless, like, Jesus, we can't stop him, or I can't figure out this slump. What if I'm telling you, we have the answers. We have the solutions right here. And you can be a part of that. And I think that's been, hopefully, that'll spread.
Yeah, I hope so. And then I know you made the switch back to high school athletics. How's that going? What's been going on there for you?
I would say I was underestimated a couple things. I underestimated how refreshing, how refueling, how capacity giving just a smaller age group would give me. So I have 14 through 18, right? Instead of 18 through 23. But we're not too cool yet. We're not as rigid in some of our belief systems because we're still learning, and we're still malleable. Like, we're trying to find it, right? I'm a sophomore, I'm a junior. I'm trying to find me, but I'm still kind of open to some direction. That's been really awesome, both on the court and in the teams I'm in. We did 9 sessions this summer. So I give my players a ton of credit for them being open books and being really willing to embrace this new crazy person that's our head coach. And he started off not on the basketball court. We were in a meeting for teams of men. I underestimated some of the gatekeeping that parents might do. And it's not because I think parents are malicious, but I think parents were more intimidated by some of the topic matters and some of the things I wanted that I put out in the notifications, and like, ooh, this is very different, Kip. And I don't think it's because they're anti-Kip or they're anti their young men being parts of the solution. It was just a little bit of a scarier leap for them as a freshman or a junior to have real conversations in a basketball space. So I think I need to do a better job of onboarding parents to it at the high school level, because obviously in college we've recruited them and we're dealing with adults, so we don't have as much of that parent piece. But it's been really good for me to be able to say, hey, you know what? I got high school teams that are partners with teams of men. I'm living it. Coaches, athletic directors, principals. I know where I messed up in my rollout. Let me make sure we don't mess your rollout out in fall 2024. We've added 2 more parent onboarding notification templates that I think will help meet parents in their worry, in their fear, as we get going with more of the stuff.
Yeah. Which topics do you think parents were most hesitant about? Was it like consent stuff, or what was going on there?
Yeah, it was definitely consent and healthy relationship skills, because we do a bunch of surveys, because I think as much as we want to teach young people to stand in their power and put their name on their words and their belief systems, in the beginning, when we don't have true trust and vulnerability yet, anonymity allows you to get some truth that you wouldn't get if they had to stamp it or stand up in front first. So we sent some surveys home, and I could have had a better trigger warning on some of the verbiage, because we're going to talk about rape, we're going to talk about sexual assault, we're going to talk about child abuse, and what is our knowledge points for this. So I think I needed to add a better disclaimer on some of those. And also just really trying to connect for parents that, well, Kip, I don't know how does this help your basketball team? I don't give a shit if it does, is really my answer. Like, I hope it does, but I really care about your human more. And I think parents it's just different, right? It's just a different approach that maybe hasn't happened here in the past. The good thing had some great coffee dates with folks that were concerned, face to face, sit down, feed my Starbucks addiction. And once we got to talk, the parents were on board. And also for me, we're going to start freshmen in emotional fluency. We might not start freshmen at consent, even though all the studies show us middle school is where some of this stuff is already happening, right? Where we'll start with emotional fluency. And we'll build the healthy relationship skills, and maybe in their junior year is where more of the conversations happen. But honestly, when you walk the halls, and I'm lucky enough to have an office in the school, when you walk in the halls, kids are in relationships. Kids are in intimate relationships. So some of these skills, we got to find a way to get to them and meet them where they are, because they are with their girlfriend, they are with their partners already. So, I think coaches are gatekeepers too to this work sometimes when I'm trying to onboard it. Like, coaches are afraid of the self-reflection you and I talked about. And they know if they do this session where their players are, they're going to have to do it too.
Yeah.
And so it's getting the adults in the room comfortable with some of this as well. And I've also had, I've messed up because I'm so used to, like, our conversation. We talk, we go back and forth, we're engaged. Yes, we're into it. In some of these, it's deafening quiet in the room. And I took that in the early years, even with my own players, like, damn, these dudes are bored, or these dudes aren't listening, or they're not buying in. And really what I learned was that's processing. Like, this is the first time I've asked him to look at Pops in a way that isn't adulation. This is the first time I've asked him to look at Big Bro in a way that isn't like my hero, my idol, someone. And that takes time. Just because I process quicker and I process with words out loud doesn't mean everybody does. So I've had to learn to meet people where they are better. And sometimes my timeline needs to get thrown out the window, right? And go with what people need to still make movement, but it doesn't have to be my way all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in regards to that winning basketball games piece, like, the most successful organizations are always the ones that are relationship first. That's just is what it is. It may take 1 or 2 years to have it really flourish, rather than I'm gonna just focus on winning this year by, doing all these things that you can force players to do to get you to win immediately, rather than I'm going to be relationship driven and allow this thing to flourish over time, so that someone like me who went to college and all of my groomsmen are guys that I played baseball with. I mean, that's awesome. Like, yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, like, I graduated college in 2014. I'm getting married this year. That's 10 years later. None of us live in the same state. All 6 of us coming together, like, beautiful. like
That's
our
amazing.
relationships have evolved over time. Like we got kids, we're married, like we talk about way different things than we used to talk about, which is amazing. Like that's something that no matter how my baseball career went can never, ever, ever be taken away from me. And if those are the things that we can instill, and we talk about some of the poor decisions we made and how we treated people and how we don't want to do that, and how we might foster those relationships with your boys if we have them, and things of that nature, and how things have changed and how social media has kind of evolved, and sort of thank God that those things weren't filmed when we were doing that, like all these sorts of really tough stuff that kids nowadays have to think about. Like they could be an 11-year-old boy, and I could make one choice that could be on the internet for the rest of my life. And I'm 11 years old. I don't know what I'm doing, or, and so, it's more complicated now. So there needs to be more comprehensive things that we have to approach, rather than just like, hey, you need to, put your hand over your nuts when you set a screen. Like, okay, cool, man.
When you said relationship, it made me think, because you're so right. But I think coaches sometimes, I'm not sure we're interested in the real relationship. We'd rather have obedience, right? And we need to recognize that relationships are two ways. And that's really hard because we're used to the whistle of power. We're used to the clipboard of dominance. And what I say goes and moves in here. And then we're shocked when that doesn't happen in our real relationship. But we're also modeling for our young men a faulty version of what an actual relationship is, especially if we win under that model. Right. That's what's scary, I think, sometimes, is we can win under dictatorships. And then we associate that with, well, we won because coach was distant, not human, and hated us. Right. No. We won because we were ballers. Right. It had shit to do with him. Right. Yeah, like thank God you had that. But I also recognize, too, some of my most powerful seasons where I felt like, man, I really love these dudes. I'm really excited to see these guys, was when I was sharing all my failures. Like, guys, let me tell you how I effed up. I have a teenage daughter. Let me tell you how I fucked up. Let me tell you how I recognize now, just like you and I did, I recognize now that my status in this program over 30 years as the storyteller is really rooted in me airing people's grievances and violating trust. And I think what that did, and you would have to ask my guys this over 15 years of college basketball head coaching, I think it made me a human. Right. And coach isn't like, I think a lot of times kids are like, they got the practice plan, they have all the damn answers. We're not even a person to them. Right. They might be a cordial relationship, but we're not a human. When we're willing to share, like, I don't think I did this right with my son. I think we humanize ourselves a little bit. Now, that doesn't mean that all my players, right, are showing up like Kip's the smartest coach. That doesn't mean that shit. But I'm comfortable with, I think a lot of them would tell you, oh, Kip was a human. Like, Kip was actually trying to be a human with us. And I can live with that legacy, right?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think it's a beautiful one. Well, Kip, you got anything else to add? Anything that I missed that you just want to touch on?
No, man. I really appreciate the space, and think about. I would say this to everyone out there, because I know we talked about our friend groups, and that's awesome. Like your huge story with the grooms, like I had a similar experience. But I think so often, and I stole this from Jen Fry, who's a phenomenal DEI educator and public speaker. So I want to make sure I credit her. I don't think we want to live our life in safe spaces as much as we want to live our life in brave, courageous spaces. And I think that starts with our friends, because I think it's sometimes like, man, I love this dude so much. He's fucking up. What do I do? How do I say it? Because I can say safe, we'll stay boys. But then I'm just going to distance myself. I'm going to lose out because I don't know how to engage him in the call up to better. They don't know how to engage me. So I think that's a skill set for men in general that we've got to exercise. We can still go get a beer. Hell yeah, but why don't we start talking about, man, I'm struggling with this, rather than how the Cowboys do it. Right? Yeah. That's something that I've had to try to be better at too. Because everybody knows I do this work. And I think I don't think scared's the right word. I think it's changed some of my relationships, because people are like, God damn, Kip might judge me. And I just want to share. Like, I'm not going to judge nothing. I just want to share. But I think that's important for us as men, as we evolve. And like you mentioned, I love when you said that our relationships have evolved. It's not just NCAA football anymore. Although it's back, and I love that game. I'm back to playing it. But I think we can have these convos while we're still in the same space as we were. We can evolve how we call each other up.
Yeah, 100%. Well, thank you, man. Like I said before we even started recording, I appreciate you, the work you're doing. And yeah, it's really powerful. Sports changed my life. And so hopefully we can do that for a lot of young male athletes out there.
Absolutely. Here's the 291 more episodes for you, sir. Thank you.
Hell
I appreciate it.
Doing this forever, baby. This is awesome. I can't get to talk to people for a living. It's amazing.
That's right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning into that episode. And if you enjoyed it, click right here for another full-length episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to subscribe. But most importantly, above all else, please take good care of yourselves and others. And I'll see you next time. Lots of love. Cheers.